Hello beautiful people, my name is Vendi and today I'm bringing you my October wrap-up. So you all know that October's been like one hell of a crazy month for me, what with midterms and just all the things. I won't bore you to death with regurgitating information that you already know. What you might not know is that despite all that, because I'm a stress reader, I ended up finishing 13 books this month. Granted, a couple of those books were for school because I am in many literature courses, so of course reading is something that I have to do for those. Usually what we read is poetry or really short form, like one short story and like a collection, so I don't really count those towards my reading goal. But boy, if I did. I digress. I have 13 books to show you and not a lot of time to film, so I think that it's best if I just get started and show you what I read. The first book that I finished in the month of October was Winterspell by Claire Legrand. If you're familiar with the story of the Nutcracker, which happens to be one of my favorite ballets, then you already kind of know the plot of Winterspell, but not really because this is the Nutcracker with a twist. Winterspell follows Clara Stoll, a girl whose father, he's a mayor and he's gotten in with some shady people, and Clara doesn't really know how to fix the messes he's made to protect herself and her younger sister. Then on Christmas Eve, everything kind of goes to crap when her father's shady associates threaten him. He's abducted by some not quite human creatures, and Clara figures out that she needs to go to a land called Cain if she wants to have any hope of saving him and her younger sister Felicity. So as far as things I liked, I really liked the characters in Winterspell. Clara in particular was really interesting. I'm a huge fan of people who find their strength throughout a novel, and when that finding is a progressive thing rather than, oh, I have some power now, I can kick everyone's ass, and I was never afraid of anything or for myself ever. Clara very much knows that she has growing to do and works at it every single day in this book, and it's a delight to see her kind of come into her own and become who she was always meant to be. Additionally, the main antagonist of the story, Anise, was very compelling. I actually wish we got to read more about her and figure out more of why she became the way she is. I thought she was a really interesting foil to Clara because they're both just such lonely girls and they react to it in wildly different ways, so it's really interesting to think that were circumstances different, they might have been in each other's shoes. As far as things I didn't like, some of the secondary characters felt less like they were in charge of their own stories and more like they were plot devices in Clara and Anise's. Additionally, the climax felt a little bit abrupt, and because of the ending, it sort of felt like there were two climaxes, one in Cain and one in like the human world in New York, which I really liked the second ending, but the first one felt like it happened far too fast. Overall, I super enjoyed Winterspell. I can't wait to read more by Claire Legrand, and I gave it a 3.75 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read in the month of October was Milk by my lovely friend Emma Rosen, who is a book/author tuber, and I'll have her linked in the description box below. Milk is one half Emma's memoir about her experiences breastfeeding and one half nonfiction expose of the realities of breastfeeding in, as the subtitle suggests, a society that's forgotten how. I've done a full review of Milk on my channel, so I'll keep this little thing brief. Things I liked. Emma's story was really compelling, and the nonfiction elements she brought in, talking about the realities of breastfeeding in the UK, where it's sort of a little more frowned upon now because formula is super popular, just like it is in the US. All of that was really interesting, and it's not something I ever thought about, despite being like a cis woman who wants to have children myself one day and who definitely wants to breastfeed them. Emma's voice is just so quintessentially British as well, and it's so delightful to read from her point of view and just see the things that she thought were important about a specific moment or setting. It gives you a good insight to how she thinks as well as the world of breastfeeding. I can't think of something I don't like. Milk was great. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars, and I recommend that you pick it up. It's available in ebook and paperback, and I'll have the link where you can buy it in the description box below. Thirdly, I read Dredd Nation by Justina Ireland. Dredd Nation follows Jane McKean, a young black girl born after the Civil War, who, like all other black children, has been forced into a re-education camp where they are trained to fight zombies because a zombie outbreak broke out just as soon as the war ended. Jane is really good at what she does, but she's a little bit reckless and kind of a maverick, so when certain families start disappearing in her town of Baltimore, she starts to investigate. And when she's caught, she's sent to a colony out west where the shambler or zombie outbreak is a little bit worse, and she finds out that her society is a lot worse off than she initially thought. I will have a full review of Dredd Nation up on my channel very, very soon, but until that's there, one of the things that I really liked about it, and actually perhaps my favorite part, and it was hard to pick, was the setting that Justina Ireland created. The Wild West is just such a romanticized part of American history, and I think that it blended so well with Restoration era Jim Crow politics. As much as anything about that time period can be good, you know? But I digress. And it was a perfect backdrop for a zombie outbreak. There's just something about like this wide expanse of desert with one single body shambling around, and as it gets closer, you see it's not quite human. That just, gives me the creeps in such a beautiful way. Additionally, the other settings, such as Miss Preston's fighting school and how it was actually based off of the real, like, native re-education schools that were around in the US during that time, is just chilling and haunting. And the book really feels like if there had been a zombie outbreak that broke out post-Civil War, this is kind of what it would probably look like. As far as things I didn't like, and it's just one small thing about the protagonist, Jane, is that she's a little bit not like other girlsy. She's all about, you know, being physically strong and not caring about her physical appearance. But then that second bit is like thrown out the window, and she likes being beautiful at the same time. And it's like, okay, fine, I'm down with that. And it also makes sense considering her job that she's really into physical appearance. What really gets me though is when she starts tearing down another girl named Catherine. And Jane initially like says, like, oh, my complaints about Catherine are that she's prissy, but really every single time she turns around to complain about Catherine, it's to talk about how pretty she is and how jealous she is. And that's just, no, please no. But overall, those are very small complaints. I quite enjoyed Dredd Nation, and I gave it a 4, maybe a 4.25 out of 5 stars. After this, I read Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. The Bluest Eye follows several Black families in the 1940s, primarily focusing on Pecola's family. Pecola is a young Black girl who is bullied by her classmates for the way she looks, and she spends her nights praying for blue eyes so that she'll be beautiful and she will stop being made fun of. As the story unfolds, you begin to see more of Pecola's life through her eyes, through her friends' eyes, and then through some flashbacks of her father and mother and other people's. It all sort of culminates in this very tragic way. I don't want to say much more in fear of spoiling it, so I'll go with the thing I liked. In a way, this book was sort of like a satire on the, you know, sort of slice of life stories that would have been popular around this time, like the Dick and Jane readers. So basically it takes like the white family, you know, 2.5 kids, a dog, the white picket fence, you know, mommy and daddy who love each other, and turns it completely on its head and says that's not what family life is for a lot of the American population. And in doing so, it tackles racism, it tackles colorism, it tackles the way that those two things are slowly internalized as you grow up, especially in the 1940s when racism was far more overt. It also, and I know some people might consider this a spoiler, but I think it's something that you need to know before going into this book, just in case it might affect you, because it's heavy. It's a heavy topic. It deals with child abuse and molestation, so if that's a topic that you're uncomfortable reading about, maybe steer clear of this one. As far as things I didn't like about The Bluest Eye, I mentioned earlier that it was told from many different points of view, and they were all kind of necessary to sort of show how Pecola did up the way she did. It was a little jarring to jump back and forth so much, and to have to sort of reframe what angle we're tackling the story from at any given point in time. Overall, I really enjoyed The Bluest Eye. It was a very haunting read, but a very important one, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Following that, I needed something light, so I read Heretics Anonymous by Katie Henry. This book has been all over BookTube, so I'm pretty sure you already know, but in case you don't, Heretics Anonymous follows Michael, a boy who's moved to a new city and is enrolled in a Catholic school. Michael is an atheist, and he feels like he won't really belong until he meets a girl named Lucy who argues with one of the nuns at school, and Michael thinks that he's found another atheist who he can band together with. But it turns out Lucy is a very, very devout Catholic and actually wants to become a priest, so like Michael, she doesn't quite fit in. She and a group of other kind of Catholic school misfits have joined together and created the group Heretics Anonymous, and when Michael joins, they kind of decide to take their complaints with the hypocrisies and everything that are happening at the school public. So as far as things I liked, I very much liked how cinematic this book was. Everything felt like it would fit beautifully on screen or in like a TV series. The pace was quick, the characterization was also a little bit quick for some things, which I wasn't as big a fan of, but the main characters like Michael and Lucy and those who got a lot of screen time were very fleshed out, and their ideas and opinions made a lot of sense to me. Additionally, I just really loved how Heretics Anonymous handled a wide variety of religions. Of course, I can't speak for all of the religions present, but from where I was standing, it appeared to be very tastefully and respectfully done. There was jokes made about everyone, and when things got a little too far, other characters were not afraid to call the jerks who went too far out. As far as things I didn't like, I think that the relationships maybe did not need to be there. And by relationships, I mean specifically the romantic relationship between Lucy and Michael. I mean, you kind of know from the start, because he's super attracted to her from the start, that they're gonna end up together. But I don't think they needed to. I think their friendship was a stronger basis for everything than some romantic feelings. And I think that him putting her on the pedestal that he puts her actually weakens the story. I wish they just remained friends and that he decided that he wanted to do the right thing to be good to his friends, not because he felt bad for screwing up a relationship with a girl. Overall though, I really liked Heretics Anonymous and I gave it a solid 4 out of 5 stars. After that, I read The Boneless Mercies by April Genevieve Tucholke. The Boneless Mercies is a gender-swapped Beowulf retelling following a girl named Frey and her friends Ovi, Runa, and Juniper, who are all boneless mercies. The job of boneless mercies is thankless. They go from village to village in Vorsland, killing for money, but the killing they do is sort of ending the sufferings of those who otherwise would not be able to reach Valhalla, essentially. One day, the girls, especially Frey, kind of tire of going around doing thankless killing, and Frey, who seeks the kind of glory that a boneless mercy could never have, decides that they ought to go on a quest to kill the Blue V beast, and the story really goes from there. Things I liked about the Boneless Mercies: I really liked the structure of it. I love that it was structured as an epic poem. What that means is that there's multiple climaxes, so it's not like it builds, and then culminates. There's multiple points of culmination throughout. It took me a minute to sort of get into the flow of that, because since this is a YA, I kind of expected the more standard YA plot structure, but as soon as I was like, oh no, this is more closely following the structure of an epic poem, I was definitely 100% on board. Additionally, the settings were described so vividly and so beautifully. The feel of it, the atmosphericness of the Boneless Mercies made it such a wonderful read. As far as things that I didn't like as much, I'm gonna say that besides Frey, all of the characters, despite the story feeling like an epic rather than a YA, sort of straddled this awkward middle line between being YA characters with backstories that you get to explore and characters in an epic who you just sort of know for their kind of more one-dimensionalness. Generally speaking, I love me a girl squad, but I felt a little bit awkward about this one, and because of that, I gave The Boneless Mercies a 3.75 out of 5 stars. After this, I listened to my friend Avery read Barbie as Rapunzel. If you know the tale of Rapunzel, wherein there's a girl in a tower, she lets down her hair for a prince to come up and save her, and there's a witch, and the prince and the witch fight, and things live happily ever after, and you know Barbie, which is kind of all about like female empowerment, then you can kind of imagine what the plot of this story was like. God, the Barbie as Rapunzel movie was maybe my favorite Barbie movie. I didn't even know that there were book versions of these, so I absolutely adored this one. As far as things I liked, because it's a picture book, the pictures were a big part of the story, and I think the art for this book was absolutely phenomenal. The paintings were so lovely and vivid and colorful and detailed, and it just felt very in line with this whimsicalness and beauty of both Barbie stories and the sort of Disneyfied version of Rapunzel that we all know and love. As far as things I didn't like, I mean, sue me, I loved all of it, so I guess like actual critique, the plot didn't always make any sense. All of a sudden, Barbie is an artist, and that is now the crux of the story. Or I'm sorry, Rapunzel is now an artist. Things just sort of happened, Deus Ex Machina style, but I'm here for it. I loved it. I ended up giving it a 5 out of 5 stars just because of nostalgia. After that, I read another nostalgic read, and that is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. If you don't know the plot of this story, essentially a young girl named Alice is listening to her older sister do her lessons, and then out of the blue, she sees a rabbit wearing a waistcoat and holding a watch and saying he's late, and she decides to follow him, and she accidentally tumbles into the world of Wonderland where nothing is as it seems and everything is magical, and it's just, oh god, it's so good. I mean, I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. You can guess that. This is one of those stories that is always perfect no matter how many times I read it. If I had to pick a thing that I liked more than anything during this read through of the story, it would definitely have to be Alice as a character. Usually it's Wonderland as a setting because of how magical and impossible it is, but this time I really loved Alice. She's so human. There's these little bits of pragmatism that she carries around with her that even in this absolutely mad world, she's like, okay, I'm gonna find some logic in it. But she's like 5. So a 5-year-old's logic, I mean, it's just, oh God, it's so heartwarming. I love Alice, and I love how she's a sort of foil to the madness of Wonderland. So to them, she would appear mad because she's looking for logic in a world that completely defies it. And as far as things I didn't like, nothing. After that, I did a complete 180 and I read Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson. And oh my God, this book, guys. Monday's Not Coming follows Claudia, a girl who doesn't quite fit in at the school that she goes to. She only really has one friend and her name is Monday. But one day at the start of 8th grade, when Claudia is dropped off for school, she sees that Monday's not there. This is odd because Monday is always first at school. She loves school very, very much, but she just never shows up and Claudia gets increasingly worried about her. Unfortunately for her, no one seems to take Claudia's worries about Monday seriously. The school doesn't seem to acknowledge that she's gone missing at all. The police are absolutely no help, and even her parents don't really seem to believe that Monday's in any sort of trouble. So Claudia has to, on her own, figure out what happened to her best friend. So things that I really liked about this book. Monday's Not Coming might be the first thriller that I ever read, and it's most definitely the first thriller that I read that's so broken up time-wise. The chapters are split to like titles like the before, the after, before the before. So the timelines are a little bit all over the place and you're sort of left with these vignettes of events that happened between Claudia and Monday and Claudia and other people and Monday and other people that sort of are like puzzle pieces and like breadcrumbs that lead you on the trail that Claudia is following to find her best friend. I was lucky enough to hear Tiffany Jackson talk about her writing process at the Boston Teen Author Festival, and let me tell you, she is a queen of continuity. I mean, if I combed through it, I don't think I could find one single plot thread that was dropped and then not picked up elsewhere. Everything tied together very well, which I imagine is incredibly difficult when you're juggling multiple timelines. As far as things I didn't like, it's hard to say because sometimes the timelines were a little bit confusing, so that was like a little bit peevy. And secondly, because of the nature of the big plot twist, the way that Claudia was behaving at certain times, I was like, girl, your mom lets you out of the house like that? Are you serious? But then it makes sense later down because she's not being, you know, a not quite 13-year-old acting this way. You'll understand when you read it. But those are tiny, tiny nitpicking things, and because they're all kind of wrapped together, it ends amazingly. I don't even know what to say about this book. I will leave Own Voices reviews of it down below because I'm sure that they'll do it justice far more than I will. I ended up giving Monday's Not Coming a 4.75 out of 5 stars. I implore you to read it. After that, I read 12 Million Black Voices by Richard Wright. 12 Million Black Voices is a book-length essay coupled with photographs that captures the life for African American people during and slightly before the Great Depression in the United States. Primarily, it's focused on the Great Migration, which is essentially when Black people left the South en masse because the South is the worst. Richard Wright essentially follows Black people from their lives in the South and talks about the lynchings and the rundown shacks that they were packed into, indentured servitude essentially that they had to go through, all the way through the movement into cities where they hoped things would be better and then realized that things weren't that much better. And it ends on this hopeful note that ideally we'll be able to come together as a peoples in this nation and finally treat Black people like humans. It was published in 1941 and it is now 2018, so you decide how founded that hope was. As far as things I liked, I loved the prose of 12 Million Black Voices. Richard Wright, for an essay writer, was so poetic. The images that he built with his words almost even eclipsed the actual physical photographs in the book, though I really enjoyed those too because they really put faces to the ideas that Richard Wright was presenting. As far as things that I didn't like, I mean, nothing really. It's, you know, a fine piece of literature, very informative and very heartbreaking at times, but then also really hopeful at others. I ended up giving 12 Million Black Voices a 4 out of 5 stars. After that began the Witchathon, a readathon hosted by my dear friend Rhiannon from the channel Crescent Moon Reads, which I'll have linked in the description box below. One of the ones that I did finish right away was A Quiet Kind of Thunder by Sarah Barnard. So Steffi is a girl with selective mutism and she lives her life basically trying to stay unnoticed by most people around her because she just gets very anxious when anyone so much as looks at her. This is a little problematic because despite her wishes to go to university and sort of become independent, her parents don't think she's quite ready for anything even remotely similar to that, and Steffi is upset about it, but she's not willing to confront them, and she's just trying to get through this last year of high school basically before she can start applying for college. And a wrench is sort of thrown in her plans about not talking to anyone when she meets a boy named Reese who is deaf. The principal kind of pairs them up because Steffi knows a little bit of sign language and she can therefore communicate with Reese in a way that no one else in the school can. And as the two get to know each other and realize that they have more and more in common, they begin to fall in love. So as far as things I liked about A Quiet Kind of Thunder, I mean everything. It was so sweet. The depiction of Steffi's anxiety, it broke me because I felt understood by this girl. Like, I understood the thought spirals she went through. I understood exactly what that sort of mental noise feels like. I understood why she made the decisions she made, and they all felt logical and natural and not at all out of character for her. During the climax at the end, when she sort of steps up and comes out of her shell but doesn't, you know, completely defeat her mental illness, because that's not how it works. I was so relieved that she didn't, like, through the power of love magically get healed, because that's not how anything works. Additionally, I loved Reese as a love interest. He was so sweet, so nice to her, very much a teenage boy at times, with the whole like machismo of, ooh, I have to, you know, protect my girlfriend and be like the manly man of the relationship. But at the same time, it's like he's not like a chauvinist at all, and everything about them makes me so happy. And then Tem, who is Steffi's best friend and one of the only people she can talk to at first. Oh my god. Friendship goals. As far as things I didn't like, very little. There was a bit where September got a little mad at Steffi, and I didn't think her reasoning was 100% sound, but at the same time she was going through a lot, so I understand like one tiny thing setting you off. Also, there was a bunch of side characters who were introduced kind of as mean people at the very start, but they sort of fell off the radar as the story went on and as, you know, Steffi met Reese. And at first I was like, where did they go? But then I've sort of like reconciled it in my brain where it's like, now that Steffi has her own life, she stopped worrying so much about the people outside of her inner circle, which totally makes sense. Overall, really liked it. I gave A Quiet Kind of Thunder a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Please come back, son. So the sun is beginning to hide in a way that's making me nervous, and I was running out of room on here, so let's get these a little quicker. The next to last book that I read in the month of November was July's People by Nadine Gordimer. July's People follows a white family, the Smalls, in a sort of fictionalized South African setting wherein there were actual revolutions and riots in response to Boer rule and apartheid and just the general oppression of Black people. Mr. and Mrs. Smalls, Maureen and Sim, are afraid that, like many of their white neighbors, they will be killed, but their manservant, a man that they call July, takes them to his village home where his wife and children live, along with their white children, to protect them from the riots going on around their neighborhood. When they get to the village, their children, it takes a little bit of time, but they begin to sort of assimilate into the group. But Mr. and Mrs. Sim have a very hard time letting go of their prejudices against July and other Black people and coming to terms with the fact that they are not the people in power anymore. As far as things I liked about July's People, one of my favorite things about the story was the theme of consumerism and ownership that sort of ran throughout it. There were parallels between the ownership of things like cars and guns, which were initially only for white people, and the ownership of Black bodies. And I really enjoyed watching how the power dynamics surrounding those ownerships switched. Watching Maureen, who was in her own mind one of the good ones and not a racist, but have to come to terms with the fact that maybe she had been racist and maybe some of the things she did were, you know, microaggressions or honestly macroaggressions. And watching how difficult it was for her to come to terms with the idea that maybe she wasn't as good a person as she thought was just wild. It was a fantastic experience. As far as things I didn't like how open the ending was, and because I can't spoil it, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I ended up giving July's People a 4 out of 5 stars. And the final book that I finished was Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Holy crap. If you're on BookTube, you know what this is about. Kaz Brecker is a criminal prodigy, one of the lieutenants of a gang in the country island of Ketterdam. He has moved up the ranks remarkably quickly because he is incredibly skilled, and Kaz is offered a job to break into an impenetrable fortress and escape with a man who has knowledge that is valuable to other people. At first, Kaz refuses, but then money happens, and he collects a band of valuable criminals, including Inej, a pious former acrobat, shall we say, Nina, who is kind of an exiled witch soldier that has control over the physical bodies of human beings, Jesper, a sharpshooter, Wylan, a rich boy who ran away from daddy's home who has a particular proclivity for pyrotechnics, and Matthias Helvar, an ex-convict witch hunter who may or may not have a stormy past with one of the aforementioned characters. Things I liked. Everything. The heist feelings, the stakes, the returning to the Grishaverse, which is one of my favorite fictional worlds that are currently being written about. The pacing of this book, the timing of the revelations of backstories, everything about this was executed flawlessly, and honestly, I don't know how you can write a sequel that's gonna match up to book one like this. Things I didn't like, goose egg. Done. That's it. If you haven't already, which I think I'm the last person to read Six of Crows possibly ever, so maybe this is like a useless call to action, but if you haven't somehow, please read Six of Crows. It's phenomenal. And here we have, not exactly in order, but the vast majority of the books that I read in the month of October. If you guys have sat through this entire video, congratulations. I know it's going to be a pain in the butt to edit and upload, so hopefully you did. If you liked it, please leave me a thumbs up, and if you like me, maybe consider subscribing to my channel. I post things like this, so book-related content, every Saturday-ish. And now that I've shown them to you, I must depart to write my words for NaNoWriMo. So this is goodbye. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you with another video very, very soon. Goodbye.